So for my documentary, I watched Berkeley in the 60s, which is a movie directed by Mark Kitchell in 1990. And it starts out on the University of California, Berkeley campus in the 60s. At this time, Berkeley is the largest university in America, and it's sort of they call it the crown jewel of the University of California public school university system. And it starts out coming out of the 50s, which is like an era of conformity. The House Un-American Committee had been putting people on trial for left-leaning liberal political views, and so students at Berkeley were protesting this. And the protests were actually filmed and made into a movie by the House Un-American Committee called Operation Abolition, and the movie was shown on a bunch of different college campuses, and that's sort of how the movement at Berkeley got it started and was attracting media attention. And some of the politically left-leaning students formed an organization called Slate, and Slate was initially sort of a civil rights movement. They were trying to really push civil rights, and the president of the university called this like an off-campus issue. So the university was not really supportive of this, but they did do a lot of sit-downs and protests and riots around the San Francisco Bay Area for discriminatory hiring practices, and they had a lot of success at the Sheraton Bay Hotel, where they actually did get the hotel to stop discriminatory hiring practices, and it kind of revolutionized the entire hotel industry after that. And the next school year, when the Slate members came back to school, they were not allowed to have the tables that they had been accustomed to having onto the main streets through campus. They had used these tables to sort of pass out pamphlets and propaganda and, speak about their issues, and the tables were being taken away from them by administration. And this was sort of like a shock and a really big blow to them. So they started setting up tables everywhere. And students who were seated at these tables got citations from the dean, and they had to go see the dean. And so all the students went, instead of just the 5 or 8 that were cited. And all the students went. And one of the people who's interviewed in the movie, Jack Weinberg, this is my favorite part in the movie. He was speaking in front of Sproul Hall, where the cited students had to report. And the police drag him into a cop car, and the students put a microphone on top of the cop car, and thousands of people just sit around it and congregate around it. And on the microphone on top of the cop car that they put up there, you can sign up to speak, and you can speak for 3 minutes about anything you want. And this goes on for 32 hours, and Jack stays in the car for 32 hours. And it was pretty crazy. And after that, it looked like the students who were cited were going to get expelled. And so to protest that, all the kids went into Sproul Hall, which is a really big hall on campus, and they all sat in the different floors of Sproul Hall, and they stayed there for a really long time, crowding the halls and dancing and singing and all this stuff. And after that, administration said that, they would have meetings with the students to try to work out some resolution, and what they came up with was not what the students wanted at all. They thought that they were really limiting their free speech rights and their political speech rights, and that's sort of how it changed from a civil rights movement to more of a free speech rights movement, because they were really being denied their right to free speech on campus. And so instead of taking the resolutions that the administration gave them, the students drafted the resolution they wanted, and it got signed by all the faculty members. And so then they get their free speech and their political speech rights from the faculty. And Mario Savio, who is a big part of this documentary, he's not interviewed because he passed, but he says that, the students had to use this right responsibly, and they have to use it responsibly to fight the Vietnam War. And that sort of transitions into the Haight-Ashbury hippies, who were living in the Haight-Ashbury district of California, and they were kind of the counterculture. They, lived communally, and they were sort of everything that you would think of or associate with stereotypical hippies. And all of these people, were against the Vietnam War, but they disagreed with the Berkeley students on what to do about the Vietnam War. And the Haight-Ashbury kids have stopped the draft week in the city of Oakland, and they try to have a peaceful protest, but it turns into a really violent riot, and things really go downhill from there. And that another transition into the Black Panthers, which were an organization that were stationed originally in Oakland. They were founded in the city of Oakland, and the Black Panthers were, an organization that were against and trying to stop discriminatory police actions towards blacks in the community. And they all kind of come together when one of the founding members of the Black Panthers is allegedly is accused of killing a police officer. His name is Huey Newton, and all the Haight-Ashbury hippies and the Berkeley kids and the Black Panthers all think he's innocent, so they all kind of come together to protest him even being accused in his trial. And then that sort of, the Black Panthers really got a lot of media attention for this and other things, and they really sort of played the media more than the Berkeley kids and the Haight-Ashbury hippies. They were really involved in it, and so they show a cool montage of a bunch of, nations rioting, and so they show, Japan and Mexico and France all having riots. And then the movie goes into it touches on the women's liberation movement and how it drew a lot from the free speech movement and the civil rights movement that had already kind of been seen in the 60s, and how the women really wanted to start getting more, involved in, protests and things like that, and they were met with a lot of resistance. And back to the Berkeley campus, where there's protest on having a third world campus. The students really want a third world campus, and Ronald Reagan, who's governor at the time, sends in the National Guard to kind of calm the protest that they were having against this, and to, retaliate on the National Guard being sent in. The students seize a part of university land, and they name it the People's Park. They dub it People's Park, and they sort of put in grass and trees, and they say that that's what the world would look like if they had their ideal world was People's Park. That's what it would be. And Ronald Reagan warns them, that it's university land and that's going to be taken back, and it does. They bulldoze the park, and they put fences around it, and to protest the park being taken away. It was a very peaceful protest on Berkeley campus, but Ronald Reagan sent in helicopters with nausea gas to spray the students, and the police were surrounding the campus trying to kind of encompass everyone in the nausea gas. And after that, a lot of people got sort of disenfranchised with Berkeley and left, but the people who stayed, they had the Memorial Day March, which is really peaceful and sort of got back to what they had originally intended their movement to be about. So the movie kind of ends on a happy note. But I really liked the movie, and I really recommend it to everyone, and I think they should watch it. It was informative, but it was also engaging, and I learned a lot. And I learned a lot about the 60s, and, I sort of thought that any hippie was a hippie, The free speech movement involved just one type of hippie, but, they were different. The Berkeley kids weren't hippies, and the Haight-Ashbury kids, they were separate entities. The Haight-Ashbury kids sort of wanted to live in their own parallel universe. They wanted to, just live communally and sort of be left alone. But the Berkeley kids wanted to change government, change the way people thought, march on Washington and things like that. So they were very different. And I did realize that police brutality was prominent during this time, but seeing it was actually really different, because people were getting dragged out by their belt loops, and cops were choking people with they had little sticks, and they were choking people with it, and it was really sort of hard to watch. I didn't realize it was escalated to that sort of level. And there was definitely bias in this film, and for me that was the main weakness. There wasn't really any other weakness other than this for me, was the fact that they only heard from left-leaning liberals and people who were on Berkeley campus or involved in the Haight-Ashbury movement or founders of the Black Panthers. Those are the only people they talked to. There was no administration interview. There was no Ronald Reagan interview, and I think that would have really added to the documentary if they had some of that in there. It was extremely one-sided. But other than that, I think the movie is really good. Like I said, very engaging. They had a lot of cool speeches in there, and a lot of interesting people who were being interviewed. And I think everyone should definitely watch it. It was really great.